So let's kick it off. So welcome everyone to today's MIT Enterprise Forum of Connecticut's webinar on how startups can leverage accelerators and state funding. Very excited to have our three panelists joining us today to talk about accelerators, some exciting accelerators in the clean tech space. We have have the largest clean tech accelerator joining us today, getting some perspective on one of the companies that went through that accelerator and can talk about the pros and cons and what an entrepreneur should be thinking about when deciding if an accelerator is right for them. And then also joined by CTNext and can talk about some of the resources that the state of Connecticut can offer to entrepreneurs that are thinking about getting their companies off the ground. And so before we begin today, I just would like to quickly thank our corporate sponsors for their continued support in allowing us to put this programming together. Your support's greatly appreciated. Just the format of today's webinar, we'll spend probably the next 40 to 45 minutes with our panelist discussion, and then we'll kind of wrap up the last 10 to 15 minutes with an audience Q&A. So any members in the audience that would like to participate, don't be shy. Just please feel free to submit your questions through the Q&A chat box below, and be sure to get to as many as possible in the Q&A section at the end. With that, I'd like to introduce our three panelists and thank you for your time today. We really do appreciate that. So I'm pleased to be joined by Beth Zonis. She's the Regional Director at the Cleantech Open Northeast. Beth, thank you for joining us today. I'm pleased to be joined by Dan Nadev. He is the CEO and founder of Enviro Power. Dan, thank you for being with us today. And I'm also joined by Jessica Dodge. She's the Director of Programs and Operations at CTNext. Jess, thank you for being with us today.
Absolutely.
So I think the best way to probably get started today is just get a little bit of a quick background on both yourself and in your organization. So Beth, I'd like to maybe start with you and learn a little bit more about yourself and Cleantech Open Northeast.
Sure thing. Yeah, I'm Beth Zonis. I run Cleantech Open Northeast, which is the Northeast region of the world's oldest and largest accelerator for clean tech startups. We've been going at this since 2005, and we are hoping that we have some Connecticut participants this year. We'll see what happens.
Great. Thanks, Beth. And Dan, tell us a little bit more about yourself and Enviro Power.
So my name is Dan. I'm the CEO of Enviro Power. With 20 years in the energy sector, you can call me a diehard and enthusiast for clean tech. Started my career with very large companies, but always in distributed generation, various technologies, geothermal, heat recovery, many years in the wind industry, and last 4 or 5 years I'm heading Enviro Power, and what we're doing is highly innovative. We bring to the market basically a boiler, a drop-in replacement for heating system that generates free electricity and provide backup power that we all need.
That's great. So Dan, thanks for being with us, and Jess. I mean, I know about CTNext, but maybe some of our audience members don't. So Jess, if you could share a little bit more about CTNext and a little bit more about yourself.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everybody. I'm Jessica Dodge. As Craig mentioned, I'm with CTNext, and we are the quasi-state organization that operates on behalf of Connecticut to help accelerate the growth of early stage businesses. I said hi, I know a couple of names on the list when I started because we kind of touch a lot of things, and I'm really excited because there's a few more names I recognize on the participant list now, and quite a few that I don't know. So that's always a good sign. We have a number of different resources that we support with either direct to company funding or various programs that we help fund statewide, because no two companies need the same set of resources. So I'll certainly go into that a little bit later, but accelerator programs and incubators are a pretty big portion of our portfolio for those types of programs. So excited to introduce myself to you, introduce CTNext to you, and hopefully share some more information as the afternoon goes on.
That sounds great. So maybe let's dive in and maybe learn a little bit more about the Cleantech Open Accelerator and kind of the programs that are within that accelerator, and maybe the types of companies that you're looking for to join that to join that next cohort. So Beth, I'll let you turn it over to you to talk more about that.
Sure. Well, that's my favorite subject. So happy to give you the answer to that. So we cover really any company that has a benefit for the environment, we will consider in our application process. Generally, the startups who join us do not yet have a customer. And we are like a mini MBA. So we're helping you to build your entrepreneurship skills and build your network. And we also give you a chance to earn some cash. We have cash prizes and we have a ton of fun and lots of goods and services. So this year we actually have $50,000 in cash plus over $300,000 in goods and services just in the Northeast. And then there's more at the national level as well. And by the way, if I can say this, applications are due April 18th. So it's very timely. If anybody is interested in learning more and applying, happy to share information with all of you about how you can do that.
Sounds great. Yeah, and we'll also follow up with some of that info. As this event is being recorded, we'll certainly share this recording along with ways for anyone in attendance that's looking to apply. We'll have that, have those links available.
And if I can also add that we do expect to have 100 startups nationwide, and about half of those should be in the Northeast. So we're a significant part of the country in terms of clean tech innovation.
And Beth, just to clarify the Northeast definition, what does that mean?
Absolutely. So the Northeast in our world goes from Eastern Canada through Maine, south through Pennsylvania.
Okay.
So 9 states plus Eastern Canada, and of course Connecticut's right in the middle of that. Absolutely.
So Dan, you're an alumni of the Cleantech Accelerator, Cleantech Open Accelerator. So Dan, like, how did you hear about it? And what were you thinking about when you first entered that accelerator? Was there anything you were worried about? Kind of just, we'd love to hear about your experience in going through that. And I'm sure there's other entrepreneurs out there that could be having those same thoughts.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I was lucky, very lucky to know Cleantech Open pretty much before it was even born. I'm proud to be a good friend of Rex Northern, one of the founders of Cleantech Open. We both spent some time in the high-tech industry in New York at the beginning of 2000, and then we split to find ourselves back again in the same industry, Cleantech this time. So we definitely appreciate that experience. If I can stay kind of high level here, I think that what Cleantech Open is doing is basically they created, because let's remember, Cleantech Open was the very first idea of bringing the startup in the cleantech arena together and pave the road to success. Before that, no one thought about that idea. And I think that what Cleantech Open is providing is basically the cookbook for startups. And if I can keep with this analogy, the way I see that with the way I reflect of my experience both as a mentor in the Cleantech Open for a few times and knowing the organization and being part of the Enviro Power team here, is that the cookbook is really about making sure there's a dish at the end of the day of very good ingredients. Many times you see startups that come in with great ideas, and the analogy here is to very high quality ingredients, but they don't have the recipe of how to make those ingredients really attractive to either the investment communities or the customers or the market. And I think that's really what Cleantech Open is about the cookbook for startups in a methodic way, yet, and that's very important, in a very flexible way that also fully respect the startup unique position and the unique position of the people within the startup.
Dan, thanks. So when did you join the Cleantech Open, and kind of like how long was that process? And talking maybe a bit about post that Cleantech Open, were you able to get some important introductions or important services that really helped take your company to the next level?
I think a lot about that was on the strategy. if I'm not mistaken, we joined Cleantech Open in 2014 or 15. I think 15 it was. Obviously, the introduction to CI, the Connecticut innovation, was extremely important, much a cornerstone in our involvement. CI carried us all the way through into Series A, which was the next significant event in our involvement as a young company. And I think it was mostly about startup, about this recipe book I'm talking about the capacity to take an idea that at its kernel is very promising, but how do you really create the environment around that kernel to grow it into something that is more meaningful?
That's helpful. And so, Jess, now turning it to you, maybe, if we have some entrepreneurs here that are not Cleantech focused, what are some of the other resources or accelerators maybe within the state, that entrepreneurs should be thinking about?
So it's a great question. And actually, I love hearing Dan's palpable enthusiasm for it, and Beth, yours too, because there is something really special about accelerator programs. In the state of Connecticut, we've had a number of them that CTNext, we're actually a subsidiary of Connecticut Innovations, which is more typically known in the world of investment than CTNext is. But we are supporting a number of the programs statewide, accelerators being one of them. And so there are a few that we have done more recently in offering support to. We have ABCT, which is the Accelerator for Biosciences in Connecticut. We have previously been funding partners with accelerators down in the Fairfield County area where it was for women by women. We've recently engaged in a partnership with the MEBO Society, who's running the Minority Entrepreneurs and Business Owners Society. It's a accelerator for minority-led businesses. So there's a number of different niche markets. You hit on one. Cleantech is obviously an industry niche focus, and there's a lot that's very specific and necessary when we're talking about accelerator programs and the curriculum that kind of goes to it that does have to be industry specific. There are also a ton of other sort of more high-level ones. We focus on one in Hartford that is operated out of Reset, and they've done a variation on this that is specific to their membership, their co-working space, as well as one that they've done now in partnership with universities like Wesleyan with our help as well, where it is certainly very targeted in terms of the industries and the scope that they're pulling in from a business standpoint, but has a lot of those fundamentals. So certainly not generic. I would absolutely shy away from that terminology. I think there's a lot of really big fundamental, the building blocks, if you will, that come with just about every accelerator program, and those are vital. But specific industries need a little something extra. Specific demographics and ownership structures do as well. And here in Connecticut, it's a really expansive network of those types of programs that frankly are all still pretty new themselves and popping up because there's a need for them.
Absolutely. And so Jess, based on your experience, like at what stage should someone be thinking about kind of entering into an accelerator? Beth kind of mentioned, they haven't yet had a customer yet. I guess from your experience, when do you typically see someone asking you about, when's the right time to join an accelerator?
It's a really good question. What happens is we're talking about companies that have a little more than a nugget of an idea. There should be some fundamentals in place because the accelerator structure, and Dan, you could probably speak to this as well, is going to test them on those kinds of things. They are going to press you on who your customers are and what your value proposition is, all of the things that truly require there to be something beyond just something innovative as an idea on paper, but truly looking at the business structure around it. We often see that the words incubator and accelerator are kind of used interchangeably in my world, where most of the companies are not yet generating revenue. Incubators tend to fall a little bit earlier. If you think of sort of the baby chick, it's at least the graphic representation that my mind goes to. Those are really kind of your baby companies. They're really just sort of chipping away at the shell to get out there and grow. Accelerators should be a step beyond that. Again, depending on the niche industry, if it is more tech-based, a mixture of companies that have some revenue and don't is very, very likely, just because those fields of industry tend to generate revenue a little bit more short-term than, say, a bioscience company. So those kind of key indicators can vary accelerator by accelerator. It is oftentimes, though, that they're really sort of looking to take the leap from this was my baby pet project to now I need to decide whether this is a full-time gig for me. From a personal CEO standpoint, that's typically the jump off point that we end up seeing. But accelerators can carry you through even a little bit further than that in your development as a business.
And so Beth, you kind of used the term like it's the MBA. I guess in the Cleantech Open, are the members that are participating, are they spending all of their time in the accelerator? Are they spending maybe 20 hours a week, 30 hours a week? Kind of how long is the program, and kind of like what can they expect if as they're going through your program?
Sure, I can answer that easily. So the typical time frame is about 10 hours a week during the core part of what we're doing. So the program runs from May through October, give or take. And the core part of the program when the deliverables are due is between June and August. So so that's the core part of it. And if I could just if you'll indulge me for a moment to explain how this works. So there are some key components to the program. There are events, lots of events where we do coaching and training and lots of opportunity for the startups to get to test their assumptions and meet new people. We have a two to 3 day academy at the beginning and many workshops and clinics. We also have an online curriculum, and that's what they work on with the coaching of their mentors. So every startup is matched with several mentors. In the Northeast, we're able to match as many as 4 mentors per startup. So they get a lot of support. And then we have an investor connect at the end, as well as a showcase. And the fun part is the pitch competition, where the startups get to compete for cash prizes and recognition, and then they get to meet all of these potential investors and really help to think about how they're going to meet their next milestones with funding and building their teams and working further on their technology. And I suspect that Dan would probably have some comments about what his experience was with that too.
Yeah, so I think that's a good segue to have Dan maybe speak more about that and kind of what he learned from his time in the Cleantech Open.
Yeah, I think that starting from the very end, it's about managing priority and understanding what the priorities are. Think about it. A startup is a very unique animal. A successful startup has the DNA of a large company. And although in large companies, sometimes dozens of people, sometimes hundreds of people taking those tasks and thinking about this through the day, in a startup, when you're lucky, it's you and your partner who have to think about everything from the supply chain, the value chain, the customer, the design for manufacturing, energy and strategy and so forth, all down to 2 people that in between needs to manage life. I think that the so unique element of the Cleantech Open, that it helps you to set priorities, to really understand how to think methodically through all those elements and bringing to one coherent, in our case, maybe a presentation, but a thought or business plan and so forth. That's so important. Without that, you can very easily get lost, specifically if you are a successful startup, because then you do have all those ingredients. You have in your DNA all the elements that are there to bring you to be a large company, but it's a big challenge to do that within a team of 2 that barely start.
Yeah, that's I think that's a great way of looking at it. And Beth, just kind of going back to that curriculum, and you talked a lot about the virtual, not virtual, just the programs that you've typically had. Obviously 2020 was just a totally different year, and so I'm sure your organization really had to adapt to that. Could you just maybe speak to what's kind of happened in 2020 in terms of virtual events, and how's that changed? And maybe, I don't know if you get this question a lot, but, do you maybe sense that maybe entrepreneurs might be a little bit more hesitant to join an accelerator when it's not in person?
Well, actually, the reverse seems to be true. So what happened in 2020 was obviously pretty dramatic and horrible for many, many people. But for Cleantech Open, it turned out that we actually were able to pivot pretty nicely from an in-person to a virtual setting. We don't have a space where people work with us. So just to clarify, what we're providing is the programming, and we meet people in person at events which are hosted by third-party entities. So that's the big missing piece, is being able to be in person with people and having that extra excitement of being in the same room together. That's what has been missing for all of us for the whole year. But in spite of all of that, what we found was that the virtual nature of the program made it easier for more people to participate. They didn't have to travel. They saved money and saved time. We had a higher completion rate than we've ever had. More people participated regularly in the events that we set up, and we were able to include people from all over the place. So during the pandemic time, when everyone was supposed to be quarantining, we found that some people moved back to be with family in faraway places, and they were still able to participate. And we had experts who could participate from far away as well. So we had people participating from everywhere. And so that's a really interesting lesson. We also had to learn a lot about how to do things virtually, but I think we're all pretty competent at it. Not to say that it's our favorite thing all the time, but I think we're all getting pretty good at Zoom these days.
Yeah, I think we're definitely have experience now with Zoom and Microsoft Teams, and that's great to hear the progress and the records that Cleantech Open had in 2020, despite such a challenging year. And Jess, maybe to kind of talk about that same kind of question, in terms of really, in your experience with the entire, entrepreneurial ecosystem in Connecticut, in terms of, seeing accelerators shift to a virtual setting, and how that's impacted some of the accelerators within the state of Connecticut, and some of the, maybe in addition to that, some of the programs that you're offering.
Yeah, I think that I would echo a lot of what Beth said. I think fundamentally this was a rough ride, but many of the programs that we work with and know of just did such a stellar job in pivoting online. I think generally people adapted very differently in terms of their expectations. They were a little bit more intentional, so that if there was something to meet, to have a virtual connect on, it was sort of expedited and prioritized accordingly. This sort of human consciousness of the fact that there's, somebody probably also working from home in your home, trying to make sure that you make the most of the divide and conquer within your day, I think really resonated very well, and frankly fits very well inside of an accelerator format that is typically cohort driven and curriculum driven, as we've said. Statewide, I can't say enough good things. I was so impressed with the resilience of our Connecticut businesses, with the way that the programming that we support. I mean, we have many programs under the purview of CTNext. There's 9 initiatives that we run in total, and under many of them are other programs. So it's an umbrella underneath an umbrella, all with very different expectations and models. And I had a lot of requests to adjust budget allocations and things that came in pretty quickly because physical events were not happening. And I would be hard pressed to find an institution or a company that really came across my desk anyway that didn't have a pretty good idea in ways to be most effective in repurposing and reprioritizing to adapt. I think the companies will really benefit long-term in knowing that now this is a very workable solution if the right opportunity strikes and there is a need to otherwise be virtual or expedite a meeting. I do think fundamentally though, all of our businesses miss the in-person. One of the nice benefits with an accelerator, whether there be a physical location or not, is that many of our initiatives have this sense of community within your cohort. You all start at the same time and for the most part end at the same time. And you do get to not just bounce around things with a mentor or somebody that is instructional with a topic for the week, or, you know, giving out the homework for that day's topic, but you bond with your colleagues. Entrepreneurs bounce a lot of stuff off of each other. So although I think that these virtual access points will continue to be a good tool in their pocket, I would venture to guess that many of them will be very eager, when safe to do so, to once again kind of get back with one another and just sort of shoot the breeze amongst one another in an effort to problem solve in future.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's I think it's amazing the resiliency that we've seen with our Connecticut companies and what they continue to do. And I think the sense of community is a really important thing that is missing from these in-person events. And I guess, you know, one question that I had in terms of, you know, maybe like what's the, you know, what do you think is like the most important part of joining an accelerator? And maybe I'll let Beth handle that in terms of, you know, is it the mentoring? Is it the maybe able to think through strategy? You know, Beth, what would you think is like the most important aspect of joining an accelerator?
That's a great question. And I have a very simple answer, that startups interested in accelerating their business need to be coachable. It's very simple. So what I mean by that is that you need to be you need to have a mindset that you are open to receiving information and having other people give you advice, and thinking about how you want to take that advice. Some of it you may want to take literally, some of it you may not want at all, but and then there's some that's somewhere in between. But it is very important to be willing to listen and to learn from others around you, and to follow through on the expectations of the program. That's it. It's hard work, but it is not complicated. There's nothing complicated about it. It's just a question of, like Dan said, prioritizing and I think also just being present and being willing to learn and being open-minded.
If I may, I would like to just stress further what Beth has just said. It's so true. And I'll just add my kind of personal angle, being in the startup world for over a decade now. It's even go beyond being coachable or understanding that you need to hear an advice. By that fact, what you're saying as a leader of a startup, that you're part of an ecosystem, that you need to be aware of what's around you, what others think about you, and reflect on that. We, by the way, we are not a young startup by any measure right now, but still, we decided to join the Greenton Labs lately, and for that specific reason, I think that we are discounting the element of belonging, the element of being part of a larger ecosystem related to the success of the successful startups around us. It's not only about the leadership or an idea or an execution. It's really the capacity to be part of a community and to impact the community and be impacted by the community.
Yeah, I think coachable, as Beth said. I think from the CT Innovations perspective, I think most of my colleagues would say having a team that's very coachable is something that is very desirable from an investor standpoint. I think a team that's not coachable is very hard to back from an investor standpoint. So I can certainly agree with that. I think as we've talked about, resiliency during 2020. I mean, Dan, I'd like to maybe ask you in terms of, what did you do during the pandemic to help you get through this challenging time, and how has this pandemic impacted you and your company, and kind of what have you done to get through that?
We were extremely lucky to close Series A just short 3 months before the pandemic. I don't want to think what happened if all that came a little bit earlier. So we had already our path and a very, very clear goal with a team in place. Obviously, from the physical point of view, we took all the measurements, but as I tend to say to the CEO of our larger strategic investor, Burnham Holding, it's much easier to manage that when you have a team of 7 rather than 1,200 people under you. So obviously, it's a task, but manageable. From other perspective, we kept recruiting through the internet. We found that this is actually a very viable tool. I think that people really adopted very quickly. We just recently participated in a Greenton Labs recruiting event, and on that night, there was a very successful interview, and the next morning, kind of a job offer. So it works. But I agree with everyone here that the human factor cannot be taken away. And my prediction is that once it's over, when it's over, we will sooner or later tilt into the normal reality when we meet as human beings and interact.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Beth, just to talk about, quickly, you kind of mentioned in terms of like some of the services, like the additional in addition to the cash prizes, some of maybe like those in-kind services that Cleantech Open offers. Could you kind of maybe elaborate on that and kind of what that means?
Sure. Is it possible for me to show a slide? Because then I can actually show it here, if that's possible. I'll share a slide really quickly.
Yep.
And I can tell you that we have quite a lot of organizations that we're working with this year who are providing what we call in-kind services and products to our startups. So these range from accelerator and incubators, not accelerator spaces, but incubator spaces and maker spaces and co-working spaces, as well as consulting services in a variety of categories, and software packages, including for life cycle analysis, and then of course various things like how to do a pitch properly. And I think probably Dan met Linda Plano of Plano and Simple, and also Wolf provides accounting services. We also have several of our law firms who are paying sponsors who offer legal services at no charge, and there are others in here. But yeah, the Harvard Business School startup partners will do work with our startups, as well as AVX, which is the Academic Venture Exchange, and of course in Connecticut, the Yale Entrepreneurial Society has an intern program. So lots of opportunities for startups to find people to give them that extra boost.
That sounds like just to have access to some of those resources. That just sounds like an incredible opportunity for I think it'd be very challenging if you kind of on your own trying to get access to the same level of those services. So it sounds like a very attractive opportunity. And Jess, maybe that's a good way to transition kind of more into some of the initiatives that you kind of alluded to earlier, some of the 9 initiatives that CTNext has. And I think that kind of can go along with some of these other resources that maybe entrepreneurs in such an early stage are thinking about or seeking out. So, like to maybe, touch upon that and learn more about that.
Absolutely. We, as you said, with the 9 initiatives that we run, they're all targeted in different directions for different purposes. One of the areas that probably is most notable for those that are on the call today is that a lot of our initiatives are direct to company grants. So CTNext, the work that we do is state funded, as I mentioned, and a lot of the initiatives that we run involve a company, a startup in most cases, applying for funding. And when accepted, we cut them a check based on agreed upon milestones, right? Exactly how you'd imagine non-dilutive funding opportunities to run. We have a lot of initiatives that we focus on that are really focused on tech talent is sort of the overarching theme, and talent retention. So in Connecticut in particular, we have some of the most densely populated networks of what we would consider, I'm going to say brainiacs, but that's just, to pat ourselves on the back a little bit. But some really impressive brain power here in the state. Our proximity to some of the largest research institutions, Yale, UConn, and just sheer density by population volume. And we want to keep them here in Connecticut. And so we have a number of initiatives really focused on doing that. Our Technology Talent Bridge internship program is very popular for companies that are just typically looking to scale to bring on some early employees, where it's a grant of up to $25,000 direct to the company. There are conditions requiring some cash match, but really sort of low-level bars in an effort to make sure that the company has access to this awesome talent, but also to make sure that hopefully the talent wants to hang here in our state after they leave their school. The other thing that we've been working on very recently in collaboration with other colleagues of ours, piloting it there in the Stamford area that is now going to be scaling statewide, is our Governor's Innovation Fellowship. And so now we're not talking interns, we're talking those that have just left school. This is a program that's absolutely focused on talent retention. The grant dollars actually go as a stipend to the hire. And we have some cross-pollination, as you can imagine, where we're able to offer some incentives to the company directly as well. So again, really trying to tap into those local brains, but also scaling our local businesses. We saw some great success with that last year and doing it down in the Stamford area. So we're excited to bring it forward and scale it. But not everything that we do is funding direct to the company. Many on the line are going to be familiar with our EIA, which has components that are definitely, the winners get $10,000. It's a pitch competition itself. But networking really became the biggest takeaway for us with that type of an initiative, for instance. And so the nice thing about us being quasi-state is that we've been able to be nimble and kind of change our approach over the years. And last year, because the networking within our EIAs had proven to be so successful, we took what were discussions around mentorship and actually piloted an initiative to really address that. So that is an example, is a resource that we offer to companies that are a little bit further along. So maybe they have previously attended an accelerator. And this is not to say a definite, right? These are all, for instance, sort of structures. We're pretty interpretive with anything that we would consider criteria, because no two companies are the same. But companies that really are looking to do something that would be substantial, in which having one-on-one access to a mentor would be deemed of value to them. There's a lot of one-on-one. Many of our mentors are seasoned investors themselves, previous, serial entrepreneurs. So that we launched last year and will continue to grow as well, because we want to continue to address this sort of network community. I think you said it, Craig, the community that's really important around entrepreneurs. We're conscious at CTNext that we might not always have the answers to your question, but we're sure going to try to make sure that we plug you into whomever that would be that would. And so that's just really important for us, is the networking component. I think Beth and Dan, you both said it, mentors, like, we cannot underestimate the value that a very quality mentor who's going to offer you that constructive feedback is going to bring to the table. And it also really challenges the businesses who are conceivably getting input from a few different sources, maybe a mentor from their accelerator that they decided to keep in touch with, new advisors that come on board as you grow your structure of a business, and reconciling what is not just the opinion of others, but what you as the leadership within your company see to be a right fit for what happens next. So we try to make that navigating as easy as possible with a few other initiatives as well. There's a lot of them, so I won't go into all the details, like drinking room fire hose, but I'll put our link in the chat as well to poke around, because there's plenty of stuff there that just has to be the right fit for the right company. And again, we'll find the right fit for you if that's not with us directly.
Yeah, that's there is definitely a lot of resources, and we'll be sure to, as we said earlier, to share them with everyone who's attended today with the web recording. Dan, I think because you've kind of been at the intersection of both the quasi-state funding and also Cleantech Open. I guess from your experience, is this something that think from networking opportunities provided a lot of value to you in terms of being able to tap into the networking aspects of these groups?
Absolutely. I think it goes back to what I said before, which is a mantra and literally my and our philosophy that a startup lives within an ecosystem. So the networking is really an integral part of what you do. You cannot sit in the lab day in, day out, not understanding what's around you. Maybe the greatest story we have is that our Series A was basically formed based on the networking, bumping into the right person at the right time. Without that, I mean, who knows? But yeah, networking is extremely important. We receive it from all the parties in Connecticut and obviously beyond. Through our networking in Connecticut, we reached some very meaningful relationship, one of which is with the Eversource Energy Center, the Yukon University at Yukon. We have a great relationship with them and quite few platforms on which we are collaborating. We applied together to grants in the last few years, and we are discussing collaboration into exciting technologies like hydrogen for heating and powering. So yeah, the networking is very important, and you gain a lot by keep doing it, continuously.
Actually, to sort of further Dan's point, I first crossed paths with Enviro Power at a networking function where the founding CEO was literally getting involved as a spinoff through some Yukon interactions.
Yeah.
It's a very small world. Ask the dumb questions, ask for the warm intros. I'm so thrilled that Enviro Power has turned into the success that it was, because when you come in touch with one another in 2014, you don't know what 2021 is going to look like. So, it's quite honestly a humbling pleasure to see, the current CEOs like Dan and your work right now really have been able to take advantage of all of these things. And I would venture to guess it's because someone along the line asked some dumb questions and raised their hands. So we got to keep doing it.
And actually, that's what I wanted to say. I don't think there are dumb questions. I mean, maybe the answers. It's unbelievable to me. I've been so many years in this business. I cannot tell you. It's almost embarrassing how many times I wrote presentations. How many versions we have? Probably we're version 200 and something. And still, when I go to those networks, I guarantee there will be a person that will ask a question I haven't thought about it before.
So true. So true.
So so I think Beth, I'd like to maybe, kind of ask you as we have about 5 minutes left, and we'll kind of switch it over to Q&A. I guess, from your perspective, what advice would you kind of give to any early stage company that's thinking about accelerators or, thinking about, entering the program, just from high level advice that, you'd share? I know you talked about being coachable. But maybe in addition to that, whether it's strategy or, building a team or networking, just, some high level thoughts on that.
General advice, that's a hard one. I think knowing who you are and what you want is super helpful to start with. And if you don't know, actually, there are accelerators that are helpful. So we work at Cleantech Open, we work with a range of startups who, in terms of, how much self-awareness they have and how much awareness they have of the whole ecosystem and their place in it. So, going through an accelerator can be very illuminating. If you happen to be at a, if you happen to be in a place where you can enter a prize competition and do something that's sort of low entry, I guess, like easy, then, start doing pitch competitions and seeing what people say to you. There are opportunities at universities to do that. If you're past the university stage, there are other kinds of things. But if you're in clean tech, come to one of our events and we can actually, or reach out to me directly, and I'd be happy to talk with anyone who is interested in Cleantech Open and see if it's the right fit. I think what I'm also able to do, and I think many people who are, like me and like Jessica, we can help you figure out what is the right starting place. And should it be you know, is there a particular program that might be more appropriate than another? We just held recently Jessica's organization, CTNext, and quite a few others. There were 20 organizations that participated in a Cleantech landscape event for all of New England, and that was at the end of February. It was really interesting to hear from all of these organizations and to know that everyone has a different specialty. For startups, you know, we can help you figure out what's the right next spot for you. And there are a few overlaps, but there really aren't two that are doing exactly the same thing. So you really have to do a little bit of investigating to find one that's right for you. But if you find the right person who can help point you in the right direction, that's super helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Beth, thank you for sharing that advice. You know, there's so many entry points for depending on where the entrepreneur is. So, you know, don't be shy, ask for help. And you know, there's people within our community that are always happy to help entrepreneurs get their company off the ground. So we're about 10, 11 minutes left in the webinar. I kind of want to turn it over to some audience Q&A. So again, please, if anyone has additional questions, you know, please feel free to submit them through the Q&A or chat box below, and we'll be happy to get to those questions. You know, one question we had come in was, you know, if you're a tech startup with a high-tech manufacturing need, what programs, if any, are available to find to help them with Connecticut manufacturing tech talent? And then are there any programs within community colleges or high schools that could help with that? So maybe Jess, I don't know if you want to take a crack at that one.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I actually really love this kind of a question because these are the types of questions that tend to be at the very forefront of our ability to respond with things that are structured or like addressing a need. The good thing is that within our network that we have, I mentioned 2 various talent retention programs, kind of hitting at different stages of company readiness and also hiring level. But they're just one of a couple. The good thing is that the baseline there is that they have given us an entry point to have relationships with the career services departments at all of the universities across the state. The sort of founding piece to it, and it looks like the question here is around programs that may give you access to the labor pools. We actually do have, under the 9 initiatives, I'm going to be very much in trouble if it turns out that that's 8 today or what I know. But so we actually have a committee that is focused on the environment that is really specific to the higher education for innovation and entrepreneurship. And so really connecting the higher ed institutions where a lot of entrepreneurial skills are kind of taught in concept, but how do they plug in really effectively on the implementation side once a student is ready to graduate or a faculty member is ready to take their concept and turn it into that of, you know, a tangible business. And so we have a number of different initiatives. We do one that's kind of jumping to the top of my mind through UConn with their tech transfer initiative. So although the talent pool, as it was phrased in the question, is something one of our talent hiring programs might be able to help if you're really looking for a hire for an individual. The connections through programming like that and some of the touch points that come through those types of programs definitely do exist. And that's why with CTNext, we're introduced to companies typically when they become members. The word member kind of scares people, but it's actually just so that we can do this, right? You've raised your hand and said, I want to know more about, you know, how to hire so-and-so. We can be a little bit more proactive in making sure we're looping you in on those things. So when you do your intake with CTNext, our person who's a physical person, not just like a chatbot, not that there's anything wrong with chatbots, but at a certain point you want to ask the questions. We do a physical intake, and so those kinds of things are also introduced often as different networks to plug you into. So definitely those things do exist. Let me know, and more specifically, I'd ask a couple follow-up questions for that company and their unique needs, but definitely something in that space does exist.
Thank you. That's very helpful. And Beth, just if you could walk through like the application process at a high level in terms of, you know, the requirements Not sure if we really touched upon that, but if you could just kind of speak to that quickly too, that'd be helpful.
Sure thing. And I'm happy to, I'm actually not sure if I put something in the chat, if it goes out to everybody, or if I put something in Q&A, if it goes out to everybody, but I'm happy to share our, the various links that we have. So which is the best place to put that? Is it the chat or the Q&A?
You can put it in the chat, and then
because it looks like it goes to all panelists, right? Oh, panelists and attendees. I apologize. I see it now. So I'm going to actually put put a link in here to our media kit, and that's one. And then the other one is to our application, which is pretty similar link. And the answer to the question is that we look for to make sure that you're a Cleantech, that you're in one of the Cleantech categories, and that you are at the right stage to be able to benefit from our program. So those are the two gating factors. Then we look at market, solution, and team. So market means, are you solving a problem that needs to be solved and that isn't currently being addressed in a productive way? Or is there a gap is there a real opportunity here? And then the solution, do you have a solution that could directly address that problem for that market? And or does it break the laws of physics? We need to make sure that it's not too much smoke and mirrors. And then the third category is team, and that's the most important in my opinion. Is, does the team seem credible, and is the team able to really execute on what they're saying that they can do? And the reason why the team is so important is that the solution can, and the market can change. And the team should, at least the core team should stay there. So what that means is that you could pivot. You could say, well, I'm not going to go after that market anymore. I'm going to go after this one, or I'm going to completely change the solution that I'm going to sell. And people who follow you will follow the people, not the widget. If that helps.
Beth, maybe you wanted to say not can change, but will change.
There you go. I saw you grinning over there, Dan. You're right. Yeah.
Well, and I will just say too that, I mean, I know we're talking obviously about the Cleantech Open and some of the CTNext stuff. I know there's a few colleagues on the participant list, at least they were at the very beginning, and I think they're still on there. We've got some really amazing colleagues that have some really additionally defined missions and goals. The Small Business Development Center is a great resource for Connecticut businesses. They do a lot of one-on-one advising, and the sort of wish list of tools to help businesses work smarter, not harder, often to me seems fairly endless. We do a lot in partnership with DECD. So again, I know there was a question specific to the talent that relates to manufacturing. But DECD does a ton with the manufacturing industry in general in our state, and we do a lot of stuff in partnership with CCAT. So I know we've said it a lot, but connections and network is really very key in making sure that we're just plugging you in somewhere.
So one question that we had too is, and I think I know the answer to this, but Jess, is there anywhere on the CTNext website that has a list of all of the private and public incubators and accelerators that are in Connecticut?
Well, yes, Craig, yes, there is. So I'm gonna pop it in the chat here. When you go to ctnext.com, we actually just recently redesigned our site to make sure that companies could self-identify resources that may be best for them, rather than just doing a laundry list of here's the stuff we do. But when you look on the menu under Find Programs and Resources, you'll see a resource wizard. So there's a couple different ways to prompt and look for those things, different search keywords to use, but definitely it's up on the website. I'll actually throw the link directly to that resource in the chat here, not just our homepage, so that you all have it. You could do searches for just about anything. Service providers are included in there if they've inquired to be included. So lots of stuff going on. We do try to curate and change that list and update. Admittedly, with the wake of new changes that are probably more COVID specific. We have a little bit of a tweak to do, but for the most part, that is really pretty up to date and continues to change and evolve.
Great. Okay. So yeah, we'll make sure, as we kind of said, that we have a few links here that we'll make sure that they're in the chats, and then also we will send them out to all of our attendees today with the recording of this webinar, so everyone has those resources. Well, I think that's kind of it in terms of questions. I know we're kind of running up on time, so I'd like to really just thank our three panelists today for your time and for sharing a little bit about each of your organizations and also just experiences with going through an accelerator. I think from our conversation today, I think it's been a very, very helpful and valuable resource for entrepreneurs, particularly within the state of Connecticut, that are thinking about pursuing an accelerator and getting their business off the ground.
Thank you so much.
So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
And please feel free to come back in and check on our website for future events. We tend to put one on once a month. So we're working on some future programming events in April and May. So please come back to the MIT Enterprise Forum Connecticut site, because we have plenty more events in the pipeline. So that I think will be interesting to the CT community.